This episode contains references to suicide, which you may find distressing, so please listen with care. Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Today, I'm joined by Tom Karrell. He's a men's coach who turned his experience of loss and healing into a mission to help other men talk openly, find real brotherhood, and build a healthier way of living their own masculinity. So really good to have you here today. Thanks and welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Philip. It's great to be here.
So let's start, Tom, by talking about, you lost 3 close male friends to suicide over the past 12 years. Can you share, how those losses have shaped you, shaped your life?
Yes, absolutely. So I lost 3, as you said, 3 close friends to suicide. Daniel, Harris, and Bridger were their names. Daniel was the first. I was a junior in college at the time. So I was just starting to find myself, I suppose. And that one kind of rocked me. I remember getting the news very, very vividly of what happened. And there was that lag period of logic to feeling of, what do you mean? What do you mean Daniel killed himself? What does that mean? We ran over to his room to try to just be there. And our entire fraternity ended up kind of sitting around the room for kind of a couple hours after. That really, I think at the time I didn't necessarily have the tools and resources to know what to do with those feelings, where to go with it. I had some really supportive friends around me, and probably my biggest lesson right then was everyone grieves differently. I had friends who were going to humor, who were going to alcohol, who were going to distraction. Some were really feeling it and staying down and just wanted to talk about it. That was kind of a catalyst moment for me, and understanding that what I see on the surface from people isn't necessarily what's happening underneath inside.
So did this take you by surprise?
Yes. I mean, looking back, there were a couple signs. I was quite close with Daniel. He had been at school, and he had actually left school the semester before due to some mental health challenges. It wasn't exactly clear to the extent of what he was going through. I will say, when he came back after summer and I got to see him again, I was talking to a very different man. Like there was a distance in him. I think he was also on antidepressants, so that could have had to do with it. And I didn't feel the same spark in him that I had before. There was an unexplained distance. So those were there. And actually, to be honest, that week I had talked with him a little bit. We hadn't gone into the extent of what he was feeling, but I knew he was still having a tough time sort of reintegrating into college life and social life, and felt off.
And you were young, right? So you
Yes.
didn't necessarily have the life experience and skills to know what you were dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah, I was a 21-year-old at college, and I was just started to kind of find my own, and had 2 feet on the ground. Came off 3 months of travel, which has sort of since become a major part of my life. Is going to different parts of the world and having conversations and connecting with people. And Daniel's loss came right on the heels of that breakthrough for me, which sort of created a transformation through the grief afterwards.
And I think I read that you said you made a promise to live twice as hard for both of you. So, what did that look like?
Yes. It was a bit of a declaration to myself. I think looking back on it, it was sort of the main way I knew how to process everything. Was, I don't know if I had words with it at the time, but I use the words now. I believe that we all have a choice to view things in life happening as to me or for me. Like, oh my God, how could this have happened to me? Versus, how is this happening for me? If I zoom out far enough, what is the thing to learn here? What is the opportunity to grow? I think of that declaration, it was a little bit, if I'm being honest, like, how do I not feel all these feelings and like sit in the shit, in the stillness, in the grief? And it was like, Daniel was 20, maybe he was 20 when he died. And I was like, that's way too much life lost for a man who was so he was such a connector. People really were drawn to him. He had a lot of beautiful presence. Like, he was just a good human. And that's way too many years, in my opinion, to not have that out of choice and circumstance. And there was anger there was resentment, there was guilt. And for me, I just said, great, I'm going to take Daniel with me. I'm going to take whatever this energy is and go live twice as hard and really play full out in my life, because here's a man that's not going to, at least in this reality.
So I think you then went to Uganda, right, to work in community development. So how did that experience, shape you and help you deal with, the grief, I guess?
Yes. I'm trying to get my timeline straight. So I had just come off about 3 months of travel between my sophomore and junior year of college when I found out Daniel committed suicide. And I had opportunities to go travel to different parts of the world. I was in South America, Southern Africa. I went to China. A lot of them were for the public health courses I was doing in school. Some of it was some personal travel, connections with friends. And I got back to New Orleans, Louisiana, in the United States, where I was going to school, and just had this realization that I'm going to pour all my energy into travel. Like, that is my North Star. There's so much there for me. I've always been an extrovert that likes to explore. My mom instilled this ferocious curiosity in me. My dad instilled this kindness in me to always want to learn from people, and it just took off. So when Daniel died, that was kind of a sign for me of, like, I'm going to keep investing in these bigger dreams. Like, there's more in this world. And what happened with Daniel's suicide, it became clear, is like, this is going to be in some way a part of this, like helping people feel a bit more seen, heard, and understood in whatever they're experiencing, so that they might not need to make that ultimate choice and end it early. And I started getting more involved in international development, and Uganda was one of the places that I got a first internship and just absolutely fell in love with the country. And an internship turned into a 6-month job after grad school, which turned into, I'm going to move here full time.
And so so you worked in Africa then, working with people on the ground there, the community. How did that then morph into more of a focus on helping men, other men?
It was kind of Daniel passed away. And then when I was a senior in college, my friend Harris also committed suicide in the same way. And both hanging themselves using a rope, which was its own sort of like, how do you even go through that process? And those were two catalyst experiences for me. And I knew when I was in college, I very much held, I think, a lot of, I would say, healthy masculine energy, or a positive influence for a lot of the peers in my life, especially peers younger. So I was in a fraternity, which had its positive and negative effects on myself and the whole community. And yet it was a brotherhood. And especially a lot of the younger men, I felt, looked up to me. They saw me as someone with a solid moral compass that kind of knew how to navigate all the partying and the craziness and kind of still have a close relationship with my values and where I wanted to go. And that was the start of it, was just being this kind of peer mentor role for a lot of my community. And then when I got to Uganda, I would say it became a lot more general. It became a lot more working with communities of all kinds, working with young people, old people. I led these international exchange courses where Americans would come out to East Africa to learn about the history there, to learn about both the positive and negative sides of colonialism, of foreign aid, of what happens when people go to a different part of the world and try to make a change. What's right about that? What's wrong about that, frankly, and helping people learn about how to impact communities in a really healthy way. The men's work kind of happened, I would say, later on and more gradually. There was tons of friends I kept in touch with. I think tons of people I would listen to and support and kind of step into more of a peer coaching role with. And then the men's work really came into formality probably about 4 years ago.
And had you returned back to the US at this point?
I was heading back to the United States. I was 2021 in COVID in Uganda, and I had gone through a pretty intense toxic relationship experience of my own, one of the first of its kind for me. And after that, I took a year off of dating altogether. I said, I'm going celibate for a year. I'm going to focus on my meditation and my yoga. I'm going to get deep in my work, hang out with a few friends. And that's when I was doing more of my deep dive in, I guess, personal development work, reading all the books, and started getting introduced to the idea of a men's group where a bunch of guys would get around in a circle and agree to keep things confidential and talk about what was really going on. And Philip, I crave that, and I've always craved that, and I've had that outlet in my life. I would say I'm grateful to have had that outlet with people I can be really vulnerable with, and it certainly wasn't the norm, especially with guys around me. Like there's men I knew a lot of my life that I probably haven't gotten to as deep emotional levels as I have with guys in my men's group these days, just because it wasn't welcomed, it wasn't understood that it was okay to share sort of the messy, rough edges of what's going on underneath the surface. And I moved back to America in 2022, and that's when I found a men's group online. I started facilitating groups, and that's when it kind of took off.
And I think that's one of the key messages, isn't it? That men need to speak more, but in the right environment and to the right people. And so, many men don't open up. Many men don't share their own struggles. Why do you think, men keep it to themselves?
Simple answer is it's not safe, or it's perceived to be not safe. A few reasons for that might be a bunch of the guys listening to this podcast. I wish I could have you all in a room and have a show of hands, but how many of you, when you're growing up, heard something like, figure it out for yourself, be a man, boys don't cry, just shove it down, or saw that modeled by a father figure, by a grandfather figure, by an uncle figure, an older brother? This idea that emotional sensitivity and strength and toughness can't exist together, that those are like independent ideas. So I think a lot of boys, I'd say around the world, like most countries I've been to, are really instilled with this message that you keep your emotions to yourself, you don't open them up. And biologically speaking, vulnerability is a risk, right? Like when I make myself vulnerable, quite literally in the dictionary, it means I'm at risk of threat. And we talk a lot about emotional vulnerability these days, and it makes a lot of sense to me that guys are like, I don't want to tell you that. Like, I'm not going there, because there's a lot of stories of what will happen if they do. That someone will shame blame them, will be like, how did you not know that? It's sort of like, I'm just going to do this alone and act like we're not all dealing with this. And that's become kind of the normal.
So how do you reach out to guys? How do you persuade people to come along to your groups? And then, what changes do you see once men start attending, these kind of men's groups?
Yes. So a mentor of mine reminded me years ago, which is, Tom, you can't want more for someone than they want for themselves. So that's an important thing I always come back to, which is, just because I have these values of, I think the more people opening up emotionally more often in more spaces, the better our world's going to be. And yet it's sort of an invitation and not a convincing, right? I try to be, and I've had to learn this kind of a messy way, where I've been in conversations where I'm really pushing this agenda of like, hey, you should really come to a group. You need this. It's important, which, yes, I believe that. And it's not my place to decide that for another man. I think every man needs to come to some kind of conclusion of themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes it's circumstance, like it's a divorce, a breakup, it's debt, it's porn addiction, it's the books aren't working, I can't do this alone anymore. That's where a lot of guys find me and find groups for men, is enough. And I suppose I try to demystify it a little bit for men, because I think there's an assumption where it's either I don't talk about this, or I'm in therapy and it's intense and I've got to open up about everything, and we're going into like childhood trauma. And what we're trying to do with groups for men is really is lay out and shed light on the middle ground, which is, we weren't taught a lot of these things. Our schools do not typically, maybe they do more these days, but way back did not help with emotional regulation, what to do with relationship challenges, how to handle debt, what to do if you were looking at porn every day instead of seeking deeper intimacy with yourself or your partner, these sorts of things, how to handle conflict. So we try to demystify it and say, like, hey, we have these groups every day on Zoom. You can expect to have 3 to 15 guys in there with a professionally trained coach and facilitator. It's 2 hours. You can share if you want. We have some agreements. Everything's in confidentiality. And we basically talk about what's going on and give you tools on how to improve these things for your life and set goals. And I think making it simpler is helpful for a lot of the men, because a lot of the men we work with haven't been sort of doing their personal work for 5 to 10 years. They're just starting this. They're just realizing that maybe opening up to some guys might help the situation, but feel the fear and trepidation to do so, which I did when I started.
And how do they, that's great within the group, within the brotherhood, and within the sessions. But how do they, maintain that when they go back to their kind of real lives, if you like, because they're still subject probably to the same, stimuli, same pressures, environmental pressures, or even maybe they have a spouse who doesn't want them to be vulnerable. How do they maintain that kind of safety net?
Yeah, great question. And this is kind of coming back to your breakthroughs, Philip, which is, I use the analogy of a gym with this kind of work. So any guys listening to us that are like, hey, I want to fix my relationship. I want my sex life to be better. I'm kind of stuck in this nice guy archetype, and I want to be more confident. I want to get more respect at work, whatever it may be. It's like going to the gym. It's not going to happen overnight. And anyone that tells you it is lying or finessing the truth, in my opinion, right? It's, in order to get genuine results at the gym, you got to get a membership and stick to it for at least 3 months and show up 4 or 5 days a week and eat right and get good rest and drink water. Like it's a lot of the not sexy stuff that can often make those amazing breakthroughs. Not to say they won't happen quickly when you're doing it this way. A lot of it's consistency, Philip. Like, there's a reason our model, Groups for Men, the coaching I do, it's all like a subscription base. So we encourage men to stay with us for a recurring amount of time, at least 3 months, if not way longer. And a lot of our men do. A lot of our members right now have been with us for 6, 9, 12 months, some years, because what it takes is consistency. Because you're going to show up for one of our groups one time, and maybe we'll hit you with a love glove, as we like to say, which is give you a hard truth about what we see, and then tell you, hey, here's a tool you can go use with your partner right now, and maybe it really works, and maybe you have great sex that night, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, life is good again. And then next week it's sort of regressing, or it feels like you're sliding off, and that's the point where a lot of guys are like, it's not working, it didn't work, I'm done, I'm not opening up again. And that's the exact point where you got to come back and you got to show up for group every week. We use this word accountability a lot, which I think is said a lot but rarely modeled, which is, whenever guys leave our group, there's homework. There's like, hey, John, hey, Joe, hey, Tom, you're going to go for that walk you said for 30 minutes twice a week to create better time for self-care, right? Or you're going to go do this practice with your partner, whatever it may be. And then coming back next week and saying, here's how it was, or I didn't actually get to it. And then us kind of nervously challenging you of why didn't you show up for that? If you didn't have the 10 minutes for yourself, then what do you have? So that's kind of the important piece, is the consistency over time, and guys showing up week after week to change these things, not just a one-shot thing.
So these are kind of examples of practical tools that you teach men about. And I guess it could be around all sorts of things, handling anger, or being more vulnerable, or addiction. So can you give me other examples of kind of practical tools that you can teach men to kind of start to adopt in their daily routine?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is a couple in relationship, because as much as we cover a lot of different bases, I would say the core of what we're doing at Groups for Men is helping men have better relationships with themselves and with others. This is one of our favorite tools to use, it's called the flip, which is flipping our language. There's a framework we use a lot in Groups for Men, which is called Power versus Force. It's based on a book by David R. Hawkins, and it's the idea that we can either be living in force or in power. And what a lot of guys realize when they come to us or when they're dealing with problems is they're very focused on what they don't want. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to think about something maybe you've been dwelling on, of like, I really don't want to have a bad sex life. I really don't want to look at porn every day. I don't want to lock up when I get angry in an argument. I don't want to avoid conflict. I don't want to be struggling with my finances. Uh, I don't want to. I don't want to feel emotionally stuck. There's a lot of different ways. What tends to happen is that's the thing we're focusing on, and what we focus on expands. Is a simple idea I use a lot. So even if I'm saying, I don't want to be a nice guy. I don't want to be a nice guy. I don't want to be a nice guy. What often happens is I'm focused on that, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we start guys with a lot is let's flip that language. What is it that you do want that is not that? So that we could focus on the goal. Because if it's I don't want to be a nice guy, it's like I want to be a man who respects himself. Great. Awesome. That gives us a roadmap of where we're going, which means our focus and our attention is going on to the transformation and not the place that we've come from, because that's a lot of times we're way better at knowing what we don't want than what we do want, because in order for us to claim what we do want, it means we need to have sort of faith in ourselves and belief in ourselves. And I know for me and a lot of guys, there are moments where it's hard to want more than we already have. Like there's sort of an acceptance in the way things are.
And I think you said, or I read that, saying the modern man is lost, struggling today. Why do you think that is? And is it related to, we hear a lot about this term toxic masculinity, but, what is causing, men in 2025 to struggle like this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. I'm sure we could do a whole episode on this, Philip. So yeah, let me know if I'm hitting it and where to go, because there's a bunch of different angles. I'd say one simple version that I share a lot is I think a lot of men are simultaneously being told to step up and shut up at the same time. Right? There's this energy of like, shut up, you've had your turn. Men have been ruling the world for 400 years and it hasn't gone well, and like it's time for you to like take a back seat. And at the same time, I think in our lives everyone's like, men are men are the problem. There's all these narratives like blaming men for what's happening. And sure, look at the statistics, like homicide rates, imprisonment, suicides, like abuse, domestic violence. Like there's a ton of burden caused from men. That's no lie. It's the underlying issues that we need to look at. And that's the piece of like men are trying to be good and trying to be right and don't know how to improve. And I think a larger trend here could be attributed to a lot of things. I mean, there's some fascinating data out there. I listen to a lot of Richard Reeves and Scott Galloway, who are some really interesting perspectives on some of the data around economic trends. Like now that women are getting a lot more influence in society, are choosing to wait longer to have children, are having higher education rates, staying in employment in the workforce longer. The paradigm is shifting, and women actually, certainly in America, are actually making a lot more money. There's higher education rates, more representation from women. It's not fully balanced necessarily, but there's a pendulum swing changing. And this is not me saying like that's a bad thing. Like that's incredible. Our societies thrive when women grow and lift up. The challenge is I think a lot of men are getting left in the dust as sort of being the villain, or being left behind, of like, we don't need you anymore. And that's a really difficult place for men to be, because we thrive off purpose and we thrive off mission. So I think there's a lot of men who are wondering what their direction in life and where they fit into the modern equation is. And part of that path, I believe, is learning how to be more in touch with their emotions and also hold kind of a healthy masculine presence, which is, I would say, the alternative to toxic masculinity, and as a definition that we've yet to really affirm and confirm on a wide scale so that men can practice it.
So how do you start to get, more in touch with your emotions, especially if you've, maybe you're 50 years old, right? You've spent your whole life living a certain way because that's what's expected. And you've, quite frankly, any sort of emotions you may have are so repressed, how are you ever going to reach them if they're even there?
Yeah. Great question, Philip. Yeah, this is actually something I talk with a lot of men about, which is, hey, my partner, my wife, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whoever is saying like, I need to feel your emotions more. I need to feel you more. And I need you to understand me. Emotions are a different language than a lot of men know, right? A lot of us operate on logic. We operate on like, but this means this, so that means that. First thing I would say is you get to use your body on this one. And I'll keep it real simple. I use simple practices around the breath and dance to help guys just even feel what they're feeling more. Having 5 to 10 minutes a day where you go for a walk, where you maybe like do some freeform dance to some music you like, and just feel something different can be a really helpful inroad. And then I want you to pick an emotion, pick one of the simplest core emotions. So I think of sadness, I think of anger, I think of fear, I think of joy, or I think of creative energy. Those are the 5 core emotions I look at. I want you to pick one and simply like act it out or try to feel it in your body. Like what does it look like to feel afraid? What does it look and feel like to feel sad? How about joyful, and how about angry? And the last one is where I actually invite a lot of men to go into, which is to play a song that like brings out your inner punk rocker, brings out that like that warrior in you that like that isn't often allowed in society, and do it in your car, do it in the privacy of your own home. But listen to a song like that and just feel it, thrash a little bit, get angry about the stuff that's happened in your life. Get angry about the friend you've lost or your mental health challenges or the state of your life that you're not happy with. Like let yourself feel it actually by yourself first. And that's usually step one for me, is just to turn up the dial on any of them in a really simple way. And I think anger, fear, sadness, and joy are the core emotions that you can start with.
And how about, you've got your own social circle, and, maybe you feel you're doing this in isolation. I know it's very important to, talk to people about how you feel in a safe environment, but how do you kind of get that, if you are getting more in line with your emotions, how does that bleed into your, your social life, into your work life? You're still working with the same people every day. How do you continue to kind of grow, I guess is a word for it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, Philip, that's one of the most important questions with all of this, because as a man, when we start to do this work and we start to grow as an individual, there may be resistance with the people in our life because they're not used to that. And this is where the people we choose to be around and spend time with is a really important factor here. So I think a starting place for a lot of guys, Philip, that actually feels safer is something like we've built with Groups for Men, because there's a certain level of anonymity, anonymous nature to it, where it actually, as scary as it can be to walk in a room of a bunch of men that you don't know and talk about things you don't share with anyone, especially on Zoom on a screen, there's also, I think, a safety to it. One, because it's being led by professionals who have been doing this for decades and have thousands of hours of experience working with men. And because when you leave, you don't necessarily have to worry about everyone in your life knowing what you just shared. Like there's an inroad to it. So that's why I do recommend a lot of guys to groupsformen.com, because they can come in and be around guys and even just listen and see what other guys are saying first to start, and then start sharing their own perspectives. And what we really make sure is when guys are leaving, that they have some simple tools on what do you do if you want to start opening up about your emotions, but you're hanging at the bar watching sports with your friends and they're like, oh, that's stupid. Or like, just, let's have another drink. Like, we don't talk about that. Like, that can be also really hard for guys who've just started opening up their heart a little bit and sharing like, hey, I'm not as happy in my life as I really pretend I am. And someone isn't willing to listen, that can also close us off. So having a consistent space where we can share and we know it's reliable and safe to do so is very important for this, because it may take time with some friends and with our partners to get used to our new way of being and sharing more openly, even if it's what they've been asking for.
So, we're talking about this kind of new, how would you define masculinity in the sense that we're talking here?
So I'll hit it on 2 levels, and I think for most of my audience and people I connect with, I'll use the first one, which is like the quality and state of being a man in the world. like the characteristics and attributes of a male in the world. On a deeper level, and I don't know if this will be part of today's conversation, is sort of the energy behind masculinity. This is where I get a bit more into the woo and the spiritual and the esoteric, which is this idea that there's the yin yang. I mean, every spiritual tradition has the masculine and feminine energies which exist within all of us. And many would say that the masculine energy is really about structure, whereas the feminine energy is about the flow. The masculine is the riverbanks, and the feminine is the river that's running through it. We need both in us and around us to maintain a certain level of structure while also being able to be in complete freedom. For the purposes of our conversation, Philip, I would say it's what are the advantageous or beneficial or right traits to have as a man in society to be a good father, brother, son, husband, etc.
Because the importance of, positive male role models is, whatever your politics, it's, there aren't many, there aren't many very good, in my view, role models out there at the moment, wherever you are in the world. So that's tricky. That's tricky. How do you kind of get beyond that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Philip, and I'm glad you brought up no matter what your politics, your ideological views are, there isn't a lot of go-to who's a man in your life that really embodies and exemplifies positive masculinity. And you'll get crickets from a lot of men, a lot of people. And this comes back to the flip, right? Like if we're only aware of what we don't want, that helps us. It gives us data. We need to create an understanding of what we do want, right? What is positive masculinity? And maybe we start simple. Like maybe it's, I guess for you, for me, for anyone listening, think about your father or an uncle or a male power figure in your life growing up or now. What are the qualities they have that you really admire or that you wish they had had? I think of things like honesty, integrity, potentially some playfulness. There's a protector in there to keep us safe. There's a strength. For me, there's the trust is a huge one. Like for me to feel a positive masculine role model or a figure is someone I can trust, and that means that they're not completely full of shit, to be blunt. Like they speak their truth. They are both a capable leader, and they're very aware of their shortcomings, and they're not afraid to talk about that, but they're also willing to seek support from other people. Like I heard this recently and I really like it, and I think it actually connects to our conversation, which is someone who, see if I can get this right. Someone who teaches without learning is a fraud, and someone who learns without teaching is a thief. And I think our healthy men and our modern man needs to remember this, which is we get to teach and we get to lead, and we also need to humble ourselves enough to learn from our peers, from our parents, from our children, from our mentors. We need to find mentors. We aren't meant to do this alone. So I think the collaboration is also a huge piece of positive masculinity in the world, is being willing to, again, open up and seek support from others.
And I guess, as you just said, then also, having a responsibility to the younger generation. I mean, we don't all have children, but there are young people in our lives. So I think there's a huge requirement, I think, to step up and provide these role models at a kind of a smaller level, I guess, on a kind of a non-macro level.
Yes.
And so for, you've given a lot of great advice today, but for someone listening to this who feels really stuck, in a career or in a relationship or just in life generally, what's one step he can take, today to just start moving forward?
So I'll keep it simple, and then I'll kind of get into a couple specific avenues. An elder, a mentor in my life says to me that when you feel stuck, think, how can you make yourself more vulnerable? Or how can you make yourself more open? Right? When a lot of us feel stuck, a lot of us guys feel stuck, we typically double down on this lone wolf mentality and say like, I'm not going to share this with anyone because it's going to make me look stupid, silly, less than, etc. Step one is how can you open up a little bit? So that may be as simple as calling a friend of yours or a sibling or a parent or anyone in your life that you trust, and even let them know, hey, I kind of feel stuck right now and I don't know what to do, period. Like that is a complete sentence, and just see what happens. The other one, if you're willing to make the jump, is to get into a community space of men who also understand what you're going through. And this is where I will build up groupsformen.com, because that's exactly what we do. So if you go to groupsformen.com right now, you can have your first 4 groups are completely free. Your first week is completely free. It's $49 a month after that. And you can drop in with men and professionally trained coaches where you can come in and just say, like, I feel stuck and I don't know what to do. And that is a welcome thing. So if you're ready to take it further, I would really recommend and encourage you give it a shot and try it. Outside of that, one more thing is to just do one thing that you know makes yourself feel healthier, right? So this could be drinking a glass of water. This could be taking 3 deep breaths. Oftentimes it's getting off your screen and just going for a walk with no phone on for a half hour, right? Just give yourself a little bit of space to stop trying to figure it out. Because what a lot of us do when we're stuck is we just get in our heads and try to solve it like a puzzle forever. And it makes us go crazy. So do something that gets you active, like go for a run, a bike ride, a swim. Maybe there's a sport you like. Maybe you like painting or drawing or listening to music. Just do one thing that if you were 13 years old again, you know would make you happy. Like just go to that simple thing and do it for a half hour to an hour and just start there. And then from that place, yeah, to really encourage you to reach out to someone in your life that you know and trust, and or if that person doesn't exist, which I know for a lot of guys it doesn't, come try Groups for Men for free. See what you think, see how it feels. And if you like it, we have a pathway where you can really help yourself get unstuck and figure out what's happening.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. That's excellent. We'll put the links in the show notes. Thank you for talking to us today. Thanks for sharing as well. Your experience, really valuable, and thank you very much.
Absolutely, Philip. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Really, thank you for the space, and thanks for letting me share about Daniel and Harris and Bridger. It's been a while since I've talked about them more publicly, and it was sort of nice for me to relive how that's all connected to now. And for you, Philip, or any guys listening, would love to see you at groupsformen.com. And however else I can be supportive to what you're doing, Philip, and this community, it would be a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. You can find out more about Tom and the courses, coaching, or group meetings offered by Groups for Men in the links that are in the show notes for this episode. To help raise the profile of the podcast, as usual, it really helps if you can review the show, rate it, and please share it through your own networks. If you've got your own story you'd like to share, then do contact me through the website mid-lifemen.com. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, there are organisations you can call now. For example, in the UK, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123. If you're in the US, you can call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And in Australia, call Lifeline on 131114. And as always, the advice is to go and speak to your GP or a mental health professional.